Hello, everyone, and welcome to this second part of this amazing conversation that I had with Erica Canela. If you have not yet watched the first half, please do check that out right now, and then come back here, and we'll get straight back into it. I think it's time to talk about miracles, Erica.
Oh, it's miracle time.
It's miracle time.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite.
We've waited an hour and a quarter for it, but it's coming. And this is actually when I opened the book and I was having a look at the looking at the chapters and so on. I was like, oh, she's going there. She's going there. Ooh. And so, I suppose the question is to get you warmed up. So, why were Quakers? Why were they trying to perform miracles? Why is that a thing? We're not doing that today. We're not out there trying to raise people from the dead or turn water into wine or walk on water. We're not trying to do that. So why were the early Quakers trying to do that? What were the consequences of it?
So they are trying to, they're trying to legitimize their faith. And so when people are, when Quakers are coming into town and essentially saying like, this is the chosen message, like this is the real deal, people, skeptics be like, well, prove it with a miracle. And it's, when we go back into that 17th century mindset, it's kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, you would say like, yeah, prove it. Like prove it to me that this is, that this is this is God's chosen message. And so the early Quakers were sort of like, well, we can prove it we can try and perform some miracles. And so this isn't, it's not something it wasn't rife within early Quakerism. No. It's fair. I don't want to be unfair and say that people are doing all kinds of crazy things. Like they're all doing these crazy things. Like, no, it's not a core tenet of early Quakerism. Just some people felt like this is what they needed to legitimize themselves to the wider world. And it makes sense. It makes sense when you are surrounded by skeptics and it's like, okay, well, it could be something as simple as, having essentially, creating a concoction of, known healing, herbs and minerals. And that is a miracle. It could be sort of just, spending time with someone and, having something like some sort of spiritual meditation, and they've suddenly calmed down from having a fit. It's like there are things that can be easily explained that were sort of, said, oh, that's a miracle. But then there are other things that happen where it's like, nah, you messed up here. You really messed up.
Which we're going to talk about, maybe some of the times where it goes. I just find it strange, though, because, like, you think about the Reformation the century before. As far as I'm aware, Luther wasn't going around trying to do miracles. So it's not like you separate from the mainstream, therefore you must do miracles. Is this just because we're in such a that we're in a very stressed and traumatized society that this seems to be the way to do it? Like we need an extreme answer and an extreme message in order to cut through.
I think so. I think that again, we have to look at, we always have to place early Quakerism within its environment. And that's why I'm constantly on a soapbox about the decade before, because I just think that it is the reason why Quakers had such a hard time, but it's also the reason why Quakers were successful. And so yeah, I do think that there is this, I think that you hit the nail on the head there, is that because everything is so heightened that there is like, people are probing a little bit harder. And like, okay, well, you're coming in with a lot of big words and some fairly radical ideas that are essentially sort of taking, everything that I have ever known about how to practice religion and throwing it essentially in the bin. Yeah. And I'm going to need a little bit more evidence in that.
Talk to me about some of these miracles then. What's your favorite one or favorite two? What happened? What does it say about early Quakers and maybe their darker side?
I think that we have to talk a little bit about James Nayler and quote unquote the Bristol incident of October 1656. So, I mean, how deep into the story do we want to go? Do we just want to give like a little summary?
Put it this way, okay, I've done a whole video where I went through step by step where he went, which gate he went through into Bristol, why he did it, what the temperature was like, why that affected things. I've gone
So you know the
into
story.
that.
We know the
I
story.
believe. I believe there is no aspect of this story I do not know. However, people watching, they might not have watched that video because they thought it might be too much. So,
But
um,
this is an opportune point where you will put a link in the YouTube description.
it's
Go
going up there.
see James Nayler. Like and
Um,
subscribe.
also like and subscribe. But I think if we take it that we know that what happened to James Naylor, because they've now just gone away, watched that video, and now they've come back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. So you know what happens to James Naylor now. Very, a lot of performance theology going on.
Yeah.
And whether or not what his mindset was like, how much was he in awe of certain women in his entourage.
Yeah, he is a
And
player. Like cult of personality and
yeah,
a real I mean,
yeah,
seems like a real ladies man. Like so James Naylor, like this is a weird aside, right? So if I was thinking of like if I could have dinner with one Quaker from this period, like who like I talk about Humphrey Smith being the love of my life, which we haven't really even touched on Humphrey Smith yet, but he is the historical
he's
love of
coming.
my life. But if I had to have dinner with somebody, I'm 100% having dinner with James Naylor because I
Yeah.
want to see if he has like, does he have like this charisma that would like compel me to do the things that these women did? And so this, when we're talking about miracles, we're going right to one of the ladies in James Naylor's entourage, and her name is
Hmm.
Dorcas Urbery. And
Yeah.
so who is I call her the worst character witness of all time.
Yeah. She doesn't help him at all.
She is
At
I mean
all.
she is
Throws him under the bus.
garbage when it comes to character witness. And so, one of the things that she says like at James Naylor's trial, which is a huge spectacle because this is
Hmm.
an opportunity for the government to sort of get rid of Quakers once and for all. Like James Naylor, like, oh, what a win. What a win for the authorities to be able to nail this guy, take him to court and make an absolute spectacle out of this because James
Hmm.
Naylor has messed up. James Naylor
Yeah.
and the people he's with, mostly the ladies, they have done early Quakers dirty, right? So Dorcas Urbery, she's in the trial. And again, James Naylor's being he's being tried for blasphemy, right? He is pretending he is Jesus in a big way. And oh, bless her heart, Dorcas, Dorcas, Dorcas. So she is saying, like, I know no other Jesus but James Naylor. And then
Oh, good.
saying that James Naylor raised her from the dead. And it's like,
It's not
girl,
great.
you are not helping. And you can just imagine James Naylor, who, it sounds like, all the eyewitness reports from when he's going into Bristol, like seems pretty somber dude, right?
Mm.
And so and you can just imagine, so he's on trial, and we like to think that he knows what Dorcas is saying. And you just think he's like just sitting there like, oh, really? Like, of all the things, you couldn't just say like, I'm a nice guy and I'm a very talented
Yeah.
preacher. You had to go there, Dorcas. Anyway, so in terms of miracles, like, Dorcas Urbery saying that James Naylor raised her from the dead, it's like,
I buy it. I buy it. It happened.
like it does sound
But
like
it kind of makes sense though, because like if he kind of he purportedly did that in Exeter when they were both in prison. They get released and then they go to Bristol and they do this reenactment. And I'm just thinking, well, if he's like a Jesus character who's like he's done his Lazarus thing and now he does his entry into like in their minds, it makes a lot of sense. Because like I was Lazarus, I raised Lazarus, and now I go to Jerusalem. This is what I do. And So it makes a lot of sense, but you can't then say it out of context to people who are trying to find reasons to do terrible punishments to you. It kind of
Yeah.
is a big own goal.
And like, and James Naylor, like, he pays, man. He pays. I mean, he pays the
Yes.
price for that in a big, big way. And, the punishment of James Naylor, is it harsh or is it justified? I mean, like, so that's my question to you. Like, I haven't asked you anything, Ollie. So, like, do you think, like, as a Quaker, like, do you think that it's justified, sort of what they did to James Naylor?
Well, I would say that they if I'm being legalistic, I don't think they had a right to try Naylor for the things they had. I don't think there was any legislation by which to try him. So I think if he had a lawyer, which obviously he didn't, but if he did, if I were his lawyer, I would say you have no right to try this man. So that'd be one thing. I think we make a big deal of it as Quakers because it was so cataclysmic in terms of this wrench between this darker side and where we end up with what I like. I've heard you call the glow up of Quakerism,
Oh, yeah.
um, which we'll maybe come to. But I think there were other people doing, if not precisely this so publicly, there were people doing similar things. And we're going to hopefully relate this to another potential a failed botched rising from the dead story in a moment. Spoiler alert: she doesn't get her tongue bored out and put a massive B on her forehead. So is it? So I think, as you say, they were like rubbing their hands, think we've got a big dog and we're gonna make a thing about this. Not necessarily because of what he did, but because of who he is. And so, do I think that's fair? No, because this isn't a it's an extreme incident, but it's not an unknown incident. And the raising from the dead, nor the if you think about like the passion plays that go on in York, this is precisely the similar sort of thing. So no, I don't think it was fair, but I understand why they did it. Though a part of me always wishes they weren't. But then this is what I mean. The people who call me anti-Foxite will be like, "Oh, well, of course he would say that. He would say that because he wished that that James Naylor was still around and George Fox was in his position or something."
So this is happening in the autumn, winter of 1656. And then just a couple months later, we have this incident in Worcester, which it does make the national headlines, but as you alluded to, like, there is no severe punishment for the person sort of named and shamed. So essentially, so this is it's probably my favorite chapter of the book. I love this story for the dramatic elements that it brings to the table. So what the story does is it looks at miracles. It looks at very important subjects like suicide and how it's viewed in early modern society. It looks at the printing press and how Quakerism is reported. But it also kind of looks at sort of the organization of Quakers even at this early time. So again, this is February, March 1657. A young man named William Poole. He is the apprentice of a clothier who is another Quaker named George Knight. Neither of these Quakers at this time, so 1657, early 1657, they're not known to be troublesome at all. They're just making a living and cracking on. And so William Poole says to George, it's about 3:00 on a Friday, so going home time for the weekend. I mean, William Poole isn't going to be up to much because, again, he is an early Quaker, so he's probably sort of kind of shunning. He's not off to the pub. No alehouse, no whoring for him. So William Poole said that he had been with Christ and that Christ had taken him by the hand and that he had appointed him to come to him again and that he, William Poole, must go unto him. So that's a very interesting way to say goodbye on a Friday after work.
I think have a good weekend, and then someone comes up and says that I'd be curious. I mean, I suppose this is relayed after the fact, isn't it? So
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
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 there
so
could be a bit of a bit of projection potentially.
absolutely. But I
Mm,
do think that the fact that it is sort of recorded like this,
mm.
I think that it does suggest that it's probably more factual than embellished,
Yeah,
I think.
and it's a bit of a strange thing to make up anyway. So he said this that Jesus has taken him by the hand and he's going to go to him. What does that mean? But then I suppose from a Quaker perspective, Christ has come.
Yeah, or it could be like, you know what, I'm going to have, essentially, you know what, I'm going to, have my time with Jesus,
Mm,
and then I'm going to, sort of maybe reflect and read the Bible and
yeah,
sort of do those sorts of things. Anyway, so William Poole disappears and nobody hears from him for a long enough period of time that people are alarmed.
yeah,
And so his clothes are found so on Sunday. His clothes are found on the Sunday along the banks of the river. And shortly thereafter, his body is found in the Severn. And so, if you've ever been to Worcester, the Severn River is quite fast moving. Like
mm,
it's a relatively quick, it's a quick river. And sort of when you're in the city of Worcester, it's relatively, it's a decent sized body of water.
mm.
And so William Poole is found in the river. Obviously, he's dead. He's not just splashing around in February. Like
No,
that's the other thing. Like it's very cold
it's
as well.
cold.
It's very
Yeah,
cold. And so essentially what it looks like is that William Poole has taken off his clothes and has been compelled to walk into the river and
mm,
die, essentially. So William Poole, so this death is the coroner immediately declares it self-murder, suicide. And at this time, obviously in this time, like that is the worst sort of death. It is the worst sort
yeah,
of death because that has demonstrated that you have given up on God. And so this is where our story sort of takes a little bit of a twist. So it becomes very apparent that William Poole's parents, his family, are not Quakers
mhm,
because, and we know this because he is buried in the churchyard at Claines Church, which is just
right.
north of Worcester City Center. And so
Which a Quaker wouldn't be buried
a
in.
Quaker is not doing this,
Mm,
even at this early time. Like they are definitely not burying their dead in a churchyard. Come on, that's
heavens
counter
forbid.
to
No,
everything. And so,
that's where the devil dogs go. We're not there.
exactly. And I'm glad you're
Mm.
catching on to that
Yeah,
insult, which
I feel like I'm
I,
getting the vibe.
yeah, so
I'm
I would like for the legacy of this book and for the work that the public work that I'm doing is for devil dog to be like a cool new insult. That's what I'm going for,
I,
really.
I'll bring it out when I most need it.
Thank you. So anyway, so William Poole is buried in the churchyard in Claines, again under the cover of darkness, because
Mhm.
suicide, again, as we say, that is the worst sort of death. Generally
Yeah,
speaking, people who commit suicide are not allowed to be buried in the churchyard. I get the feeling, now I don't know because we don't have the records for the church at this time, so I get the feeling that William Poole's family are quite in with Claines Church because obviously they're allowed to bury their son there when he really should
yeah,
not be, for many reasons, him being a Quaker and also the fact that he's evidently killed himself. So he's allowed to be buried in the churchyard, but of course there is an element of shame here, so he has to be buried under the cover of darkness. Bear in
mm,
mind, this is February, so it's pretty easy to be buried in
yeah.
darkness at that time of year in
3
this
o'clock.
country, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a really short daytime window. And so at this burial, William Poole's grieving mother is approached by a Quaker woman named Susanna Pierson. And Susanna says to William Poole's mother, like essentially says, I can bring your son back to life, which is bold. Like that is
Yeah.
bold. It's
It's
just,
bold and very cruel, I feel, and you got to be dead certain that you can do it.
yeah, like you need a track record. You need a track
Yeah.
record. Like, I feel like,
And
but
my question. I mean, obviously, you don't want to question their grieving mother's perspective, but well, have you done it before? How many? What's your success rate?
Can I see your CV, please?
Yes,
Testimonials,
because
like
I
actual
don't want to be
testimonials.
I don't want to be your first one.
Yeah. And so, oh God, so bless her. So William Poole's mother agrees, right? She's like, yeah,
Yeah,
crack on, have a go. And so again, under the cover of darkness, like Susanna Pierson and her mates, they go to the churchyard and they dig up William Poole's
she
freshly
probably isn't in the
buried
best,
corpse.
not in the best condition.
This is the thing, right? This is the thing that we also have to consider when we're reading this story is that, it's not going to be he's drowned and we don't have like sort of modern burial practices. And so like it's not he's not going to be in a good state, right? So Susanna Pierson, her mates, like they dig him out. And you're just like, as a reader, you're reading this and you're thinking like, oh, just stop here, stop here, stop here. It's like, nope, we're keep going, keep digging, keep digging.
That'll work. Jeez.
So they dig him up, and Susanna sort of, she takes off the shroud, and then she's where this is. She straddles the body, like starts rubbing it and commanding him to rise, and like rubs her face against his face. And you just think, like, I just think of the stink, the absolute state of the smell of this. Like, oh no, thank you. But nah, man, Susanna is in it to win it. She's in it to win it. So
she's committed now, hasn't she? Like, I mean,
she's like, I can't stop now.
once you straddle a drowned corpse, there's no going back from that. You've done it now. So
there's really no going back. And you've got to wonder, like, at any point, is she thinking like, oh, what have I done? Like, why did I do this? Anyway, so she's commanding him to rise. She's commanding him to rise. Like, she thinks like, oh yeah, I've done it. Yeah, this is going to happen. They must all be so excited, right? Because you don't dig up the body and thinking like, oh, this is definitely not going to work. Like, Susanna has lost her mind. Like, no, you're
25% chance.
Yeah, like, no, you believe. Like, you really believe that this is going to work. Or certainly that's how I think of it, right? Like, that's like, I'd like to think that they're all like they are hyping her up.
Was Dorcas involved? Because we don't know who's with her. Was Dorcas there saying it's happened before?
Exactly. She is egging. She's probably egging it on. But no, we don't know. We don't know who is there. It's probably unlikely that Dorcas is there.
Probably.
So let's not spread rumors. Let's not malign her character any more than it already has been rightfully maligned. So anyway, so Susanna is commanding this William Poole to rise, and he doesn't. He stays dead. And it's like, oh man. And so, immediately Susanna is kind of like, oops, whoopsies. So basically, he does not come back to life. And so her argument is that like, oh, you know what? Jesus waited 4 days to bring Lazarus back. And I didn't wait long enough. So my bad.
Well, that's a great excuse though.
I messed up.
Good way of pulling that one back. Like, there's, you failed, but well, Jesus needed to wait a couple of days. So I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very, very good PR from a terrible situation. Because she's not saying she couldn't do it. She said it was just too early to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It was just like, what? I didn't wait long enough. My bad. So they, wrap him back up in a shroud, back in, reburied, holla at you. And then obviously, so somehow the national press get a hold of this story. And it's, like it does, like, it makes the national press for this time, like in this tiny town in Worcestershire, essentially a village in Worcestershire, like this is big news. And so, the question that, that we all have, like, just like, oh, is she going to get the Nayler? Is she going to get the Nayler treatment? Well, no, nothing happens.
But why not?
So I have theories. I have theories about why nothing happens. Part of it is
Let's
kind of
go
like,
there.
is it because she's a woman that she
Mhm.
kind of is sort of like let off, and not because she's, not necessarily because she's of the fairer sex, but just the fact that, like, oh bless, like, I don't know. Like, to be honest, like, the answer to that question is I don't know. So part of it is thinking, like, I wonder if Quakers actually don't believe that this actually happened. So because
Mhm.
once the new
Fake
once sort
news.
of yeah once the news, like, once the news takes off, someone writes, so essentially the administrator Thomas Willem writes to George Fox to tell him this is what's happening, this is what's been reported in Worcester. And so he goes into detail of the story, and in the sort of like in the margins of this letter, George Fox writes, "Mad whimsy." And
Mm.
it's like, oh, okay, but no context. Like, that's all. That's kind of like that's all the commentary that we get from George Fox. So what it's suggested is that Susanna Pierson is crazy, and that
Oh.
it's just kind of like, is. But again, nothing happens to her. Quakers are disowned for much lesser reasons than this.
Yeah.
Quakers are given very firm talking tos for spending money extravagantly. And like, this seems like a much worse crime than that. But again, so that's kind of one of the extraordinary things about this story, is just that basically nothing happens to Susanna Pierson. However, that's not the end of her story,
Oh yeah.
because she turns back up in 1669 in Bristol and
Oh
signs
no.
George Fox and Margaret Fell's marriage certificate.
Well, that's nice.
So she's there. So she's not disowned. She just kind of cracks on.
No.
And so it's like, well, did that basically sort of in the aftermath of James Nayler, were Quakers kind of thinking, like, if we don't own this story, it will go away, which I think in a lot of ways it did, until,
Yeah.
historians have sort of started digging it back up.
Yeah.
But it's like, if we just kind of disassociate ourselves from this, will it just go away? Like, are they savvy and thinking, after the absolute disaster of James Naylor, when these
Mm.
sort of miracle things pop up, like, do we just kind of just ignore it? Is that their strategy, is to ignore it? Or do they just sort of they don't believe it actually happened?
It's weird. I've done a video on this before, and this is how I got into these stories. And there's a great one as well with Humphrey Smith as well, who I think we're gonna need to have to talk about. Um, and it sort of seems like they don't want to be associated with it anymore, because I mean there is a certain element of witchcraftiness in it. Like, I mean, where's the line between miracle and you're a witch?
And
And
again, like, that is something, that Quakers are accused of.
yeah,
Not only are they accused of being Catholics, but they're also accused of being witches, a lot of times in the same sentence.
I know,
Um,
it's just wild.
but then there are things like this. You do have, Dorcas Erbury's testimony. You do have the Susanna Pierson case. There are other cases as well of people sort of, being essentially people trying to bring people back from the dead. And it's like, this isn't helping, but it ties right into, the 17th century is, it's essentially, the 17th century is witchcraft is rife. Accusations of witchcraft are everywhere. It doesn't sort of start in Pendle and kind of just die. Like, it's sort of continuous throughout the century. And so there are these sort of, just people just calling them witches. What they're doing is witchcraft. Susanna Pierson does not help. This situation
No.
is bad. It's bad PR for Quakers when they're just trying to recover from the James Naylor incident. And I think that that's what I find quite striking, is that you've got sort of James Naylor's sort of, again, sort of being the Quaker Jesus in the autumn of 1656. And then
Yeah.
you have Susanna Pierson a few months later, again, sort of trying to sort of reenacting another part of the Jesus story. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, enough is enough. Like, let's stop this.
In
Knock it off. Knock it off.
Let's talk about him then. You've described You've described Humphrey Smith as the historical love of your life. Um, as like, and I would probably say that maybe, do you would say that he epitomizes maybe this idea of a Quaker zealot? What's he like? Why are you so fascinated with him? How does he display maybe this darker side, this zealous side of early Quakerism? And does he perhaps come from Worcestershire or Herefordshire?
So Humphrey Smith is from Herefordshire. And so for me, he very much, he epitomizes a zealous Quaker. And so zealous is not necessarily a bad thing. And this is kind of something that I'm going to use my platform here, on your channel to say, like, zealous is not necessarily a bad thing. And so I made it very, like, in the opening, sort of in my book, I sort of put the definition of zealous in there.
Yeah,
and so it is, it's an adjective filled with or inspired by intense enthusiasm or zeal, ardent, fervent. I don't think that you can do the things that early Quakers are doing at the onset without being essentially the definition of zealous. Like, these people are making in huge sacrifices for religious beliefs, and they're going with it. Like, they are feeling the spirit and doing whatever the spirit compels them to do. Now, again, you're either compelled by this message that's being spread or repelled. So for me, Humphrey Smith epitomizes everything about that zealous spirit in the early Quaker movement. So much so that when I had to have a chapter about Humphrey Smith, and I just called it Zealous Humphrey Smith at the end of the book, because I feel like even like his story is, in terms of time span, right? We're looking between 1655 and 1663. Like, that is the Humphrey Smith story here. Yeah. And Humphrey Smith, so he's born in Herefordshire. And he's all like George Fox. He's also born in 1624. And so he very likely met Richard Farnworth as soon as Richard comes into the county in 1654, 1655. Mm-hmm. And so Humphrey Smith identifies himself as a Quaker very early on, and he starts writing. He is such a prolific writer. So where Humphrey Smith sort of sets himself apart from a lot of the other early Quakers is that he's writing a lot of spiritual autobiographies. And so he writes about his conversion experience. He writes about his childhood. He writes advice to parents on how to parent their children. He writes about music. He writes about everything. And I think in a lot of ways, quite beautifully so. And so, like a lot of early Quakers, he writes about his childhood. And honestly, like, what a miserable child he was. Like, sounds like this is the kid that you would choose last, to play games, because he writes himself like as such a miserable, solemn, solitary figure. Like, Humphrey Smith is such a loner and just constantly sort of like wanting to be alone with the Bible. And his parents are kind of like, he condemns his parents for kind of being like essentially condemns his dad for trying to make a living and provide for his family. So he goes, in some of his writings, like, he goes straight in for his parents. He has no mercy. So, to use a very modern phrase, so Humphrey Smith drinks the Kool-Aid, right? He drinks that Kool-Aid. He drinks it all. Like, he is in it to win it. Like, as soon as he meets Richard Farnworth, who is referred to by another historian, Kate Peters, as Farnworth's literary apprentice. And I believe it. So you can read sort of what Richard Farnworth is writing, what Humphrey Smith would have been exposed to. And Smith is writing in a very similar style and writing just as much. Again, sort of Humphrey Smith writes like he's running out of time. And he doesn't know it. Although the things that he does, he probably isn't going to be super surprised when he ends up dead. But yeah, so he's writing a lot. And not only is he a prolific Quaker writer, but he's also a traveling minister. Like he's had his Kool-Aid and he is on the road. And so he is, he is spreading this message far and wide and essentially going on a tour of all of the prisons of southern England, primarily southwest England. Like he can't get enough of it. Like if he had, like, I like to think like there would be a tour t-shirt, right? He has a t-shirt and it's got like his prison tour, like all the prisons he has visited. And like, because he is doing the rounds like everywhere. He's constantly imprisoned and really just I mean, he is enduring the worst that 17th century grim, nasty prisons have to offer. And so so immediately at the get-go, he is arrested for holding an unlawful meeting in just outside of Evesham. And so this becomes the first relatively high profile Quaker trial in the county of Worcestershire. And so obviously we've got, so he's born in Herefordshire and he's crossing the county. So it's very exciting for me because it's like, yes,
gold dust for you. Yes.
Get in. He's in this trial and, obviously being held in prison. And so he's writing about this prison experience. And so one of the sort of more striking things that he writes about is basically how the people they're not really thrilled that he's in town and has been disrupting the peace. And so one of the things that he writes about is that basically like he's in this essentially like this jail hole where people are able to sort of like hurl things at him.
Oh.
And so some of the things, and these are his exact words, like, this isn't me being disgusting, or like he talks about how people are pissing on him. And he says they pissed on me and have pissed on my food. And it's just like, this is what I mean, this is in 1655, 1656. So again, like early times, and like he is not dissuaded. Like most people would sort of have this experience and be like, you know what, I'm going to be one of the quiet Quakers who's like just waiting to be compelled by the Spirit to speak in a meeting.
Yeah.
Like that's sort of my vibe. But no, Humphrey Smith is released from Evesham jail and just continues down the road and just essentially just kind of being, arrested here, there, and everywhere. And so one of the best things, the worst, I don't know. What I love about Humphrey Smith is how painfully honest he is. And he's writing these pamphlets and like, I just don't think that he cares. Like he is writing his truth and he is not thinking about, what is this historian in 400, 300 years time, 350 years time going to think? He isn't thinking about me and how I'm going to judge him at all. He writes, like I said, he writes about his conversion experience and when he decided to become a traveling minister. And he writes he has no filter. And so basically he writes that he is in bed with his family. Bear in mind, he is married with young children. And he is in bed one night thinking, these are not people I should be with. It's like, okay. And so he tells his wife, shortly thereafter, he has a conversation with his wife that like, he wants to be a minister and just, he needs to be on the road. He has been compelled to spread this message and, his wife is crying, like essentially begging for him not to go.
Yeah.
And he leaves. So Humphrey Smith, he becomes a traveling minister whilst writing as well the whole time and sort of going from here, there, everywhere, but primarily is staying in southwest England. And he is sort of, cracking on with spreading the message. And then in 1661, he is imprisoned. He is arrested for holding an unlawful meeting. And then he is imprisoned in Winchester jail. And it's basically there where he will die. And so there's a lot more to the story, but I can't give everything away here. Like you've got to buy the book, right? We gotta get people to buy the book, right? So there's a lot more here, but I'm just giving you like the summary. I'm giving you the hits, the highlights. And so Humphrey Smith is in Winchester jail and he is given two opportunities to leave. So the judge basically on two occasions says, if you just just tell me you're not going to hold any more meetings and you can go. And on both occasions, Humphrey Smith says no. And so then in 1663, Humphrey Smith contracts jail fever, which is essentially what we would call typhus today. And this is not a nice way to die. And so essentially it's really, I mean, it's just grim. Like your body kind of just shuts down. You have gangrene everywhere. Like it's not nice.
No.
Humphrey Smith dies. And so we think like, oh, okay, well, that's the end of the story. Well, it is in a way, but it also isn't, because there are some eyewitness testimonies on who, essentially his jailmates. Is that a word? Yeah. Jailmates? His cellmates? Yeah. Basically people who are nearby in the jail, who basically they are asked later on to sort of write testimonies about Humphrey Smith, because his son, even though he abandoned him, his son becomes a Quaker as well. And in 1683, so 20 years later, basically takes all of his father's work and compiles it into a volume. And the start of this volume has testimonies. So these are the things that people have, posthumously written about Humphrey Smith. So we have a testimony from George Fox. We have a testimony from George Whitehead. And then we also have some eyewitness testimonies.
Big figures then.
Yeah, big figures. And so the eyewitness reports basically say that Humphrey Smith died like a lamb. No complaints. He just very peacefully passed away. So even in death, Humphrey Smith is managing his narrative, which I think is extraordinary. Like even all these years later, he died on his terms. I don't know if I believe it though, because I mean, typhus sounds like a really awful way to die in that environment. And so was he as peaceful and sort of accepting of death as his cellmates write? I don't know, but that's the narrative that was pushed.
I mean, I think it kind of fits into a larger idea. And I again, in this sort of Erica Canela binge that I was in, I forgot that you were in another beloved book of mine, which is Quakers in the Atlantic World.
Oh yes.
But I think it was in. But there was an article in that which was basically talking about the good Quaker death, which basically this became a whole trend that about Quakers talking about how influential Quakers died, and that it was very important that Quakers died well, very peacefully, very calmly, and somberly, and not, doing all the things that people would expect.
There's no raging against the dying light.
No, absolutely not. It's all very quiet and mellow, and died like a lamb, as you say, which becomes just a trend. And so it's interesting that, because I think this starts with George Fox, who, if I'm getting my timelines right, dies a bit later. And
he
so
does in I think 1691.
That's why you get the historian on. And so I think it fits in with this pattern. So maybe it's not true, but it's the narrative that's important. That basically they're saying by giving him this story, they're basically saying this was a good Quaker, I think, is what I would take from this.
I absolutely agree. I think that there was something like there was you needed to die with dignity. And that was, right at the onset, like that was something that was valued by early Quakers. And I mean, this obviously, this goes into the 18th century as well.
Definitely, yeah. Can we talk maybe about, like, you mentioned there about his son, obviously, who'd been abandoned by his father and still held no grudges, which, fair play to him. And obviously his mother, who was, crying, asking her husband not to leave to do this. What is the impact? Because again, I don't think this is something that's really talked about amongst Quakers, but there were many Quakers who were married, who effectively left their families in varying degrees of, being able just to get on with it, and in order to follow their calling. And so I suppose my question is this another darker side of Quaker or the early Quakers that we don't talk about either? And what do you think that darker side is? What was life like for these people?
I think that is sort of one of those elements where there are a lot of displaced families.
Yeah.
And so Humphrey Smith, again, in his writings, when he has a very successful farm. And one of the things, when he's writing about his own experiences is that he is embarrassed and ashamed of sort of how much he sort of longed for sort of earthly things and like that kind of success. And so when he writes about his farm, so the farm that he leaves, it was making 150 pounds per year, which in the 1650s,
I'm assuming is a lot.
Is a lot of money. And so essentially, so he's kind of leaving his family to chance. And this happens throughout the early, the early Quaker movement. Is like there are all of these families, and it's not just men who are leaving their families, like women are leaving as well. But these early Quakers are abandoning their societal obligations to their families. And again, this is another way where they're sort of going against societal norms of the time. And that's not seen as very cool. Now, the only reason that we know about this internal dialogue that Humphrey Smith had is because he wrote about it. And so, it's like, how many other Quakers didn't? How many of these other Quaker families have just essentially been forgotten by history because there's no pamphlet where the survivor, the winner, right, the Quaker writes about what happened to them. And so I do think that there are Humphrey Smith is not exceptional. What's exceptional about Humphrey Smith is how he wrote about his life, how he was so honest and open, and sort of, this was the picture that he is painting and giving to the world. We sort of, we read it with our modern eyes, our modern brains, and it's kind of like, wow, that is difficult to judge, but you judge a little bit. It's hard not to judge. As a historian, you are not supposed to judge. You're supposed to just be observing and sort of, basically giving an argument, providing evidence, writing it. But it's very difficult to read something like that and not judge. That's what sets Humphrey Smith apart. And again, that's sort of why, that's why I am so just enamored with this figure, is because of the evidence that he left behind. It makes for, as historians are able to sort of piece together this life, because he left such an incredible catalog of work behind, where he talks very frankly about that. The other Quaker who really comes to mind is like having this really, really wonderful readable story. So like kind of one of the books that I would recommend always is The Life of Thomas Elwood.
Yeah.
Because this book has been, it's sort of like been edited, so the language is a little bit easier to digest, and it's been edited by Rosemary. It's been edited by Rosemary Moore, who is an icon of this period of history. But again, sort of Thomas Elwood, he writes about sort of like deciding to become a Quaker, and sort of like, when the big tell is like when he doesn't take off his hat, and his friends are like, oh, wow, Thomas is a Quaker. Hey. And so like, this is another early Quaker who writes in there's something very refreshing about it, I think, about this honesty in sort of telling one story. I love Humphrey Smith. He ticks so many boxes in terms of, what was the human experience of becoming a Quaker, of making that choice. And in Humphrey Smith's case, like, he pays the ultimate price, but also the fact that the way that he died was under his terms, right? He could have left. He could have told that judge, I won't come back. I won't step foot here ever again. And he could have left, and arguably he could have done a lot more for the Quaker movement by surviving. But that was not something he was willing to do. He was like, nope, I cannot make that promise that I won't return.
The zeal dies down, and we become more organized. We become more easy to get on with. Do you think this is ultimately? Do you think this is better? Do you think this is, or are you wishing that we had a bit more than just a century of Quaker madness?
Do I think Quakers sold out?
Yeah, I suppose that's the question. Yeah.
Oh, I think that they had to adapt to survive. It's like, is it, it's like we didn't, Quakers didn't want to they didn't want to be like ranters who just, fizzled out, essentially, like as soon as they started, it's just kind of like, well, this is a disorganized, leaderless mess of chaos. Like
Yeah.
that's not what the Quakers wanted. That wasn't sort of what George Fox and Margaret Fell. That's not what they wanted.
No.
That was a rotten cherry that they did not want in their pie. That essentially, that once the whole Nayler thing died down, and that sort of those ranterish elements, right? Like that was kind of like, that was an opportunity for them to sort of move away from that. And so I think that Quakers did what they had to do to survive. And I think what they did was incredibly impressive. The level of organization, the level of foresight and strategy. It's very easy to just kind of, I think it's just to discount it, but just like they were led by the Spirit. No, they were led by the Spirit, of course. But I also think that there's a lot of backroom thinking happening, and they were very smart. They were incredibly smart with how they were able, particularly when Charles II comes back. And obviously it takes a little while because there are still some radical elements of the early Quakers, like, because we get to, yeah,
raising people from the dead or trying.
yeah, but it's like there is still sort of like, they're able to, they make important connections with people who are very well placed. And one of the most well placed in the 17th century, in the 1660s, certainly once Charles II comes back, is the most well placed is William Penn, I think.
Yeah.
And so they're making early Quakers are making connections with the right people and saying and starting to do the right things. So the peace testimony, that's a pivotal moment when George Fox writes this letter to Charles II right after the Fifth Monarchist Revolt in 1661. And George Fox kind of lays it on the line, saying, we are not going to ever raise arms against you. And that is very savvy and very smart, because they need to immediately differentiate themselves, because again, they're all lumped in the same radical basket. George Fox immediately sees, like, we cannot be associated with this mess. And so it's like from there, it's sort of like all these steps are taken. It's not instant. It's not a, as soon as James Nayler is, essentially goes through his, barrage of punishment, Quakerism changes. It doesn't. There's a lot to organize. Because when you think about it, certainly throughout the 17th century, there are so many local meetings. Like there are a lot of Quakers, a surprising number of Quakers in this period.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, it's going to take a while to get things organized. So I don't think that Quakers sold out. As a non-Quaker, like, am I glad that they had this very radical period? Oh my goodness.
Blaze of glory.
Yes, I'm so glad they got it out of their system just in time to survive. And so, but their glow up, as I say, like their legacy, like, this radical history, it really has been buried. This radical, destructive history, origin story, it really has been buried by centuries of good people and good deeds. I believe that. And that's why sort of when I sort of tell people about my work and why this book is called what it's called, like, they're quite surprised. They just don't think that Quakers, there's such a huge difference between the Quakers of today and the Quakers of the 1650s. As a Quaker, does it make you proud to sort of be associated with this radical past?
It's a good question. Like, yes, obviously, in the way that it's so, like, the same way that draws you to it, draws me to it, and there is a pride, and because I think there is an amount of people amongst Quakers who think, well, we need to get back to the radicalism of the 17th century, where Quakerism was vibrant, and we were growing in number and all that sort of thing. But then my point is really, do we? I mean, prison is better than it was back then, but I mean, do you want to go to prison? But then that's a whole other question on witness, and there's ways that we can be radical today, and the ways that Quakers are radical today that maybe is similar-ish to how Quakers were radical back then. But I think everyone also realizes that we can't be. I think what I was taken by this book was, one, because I wanted to read about the miracles and all the crazy stuff that goes on. But I think the thing that really struck me with this book was that I have always been kind of proud of this of this radical side, that I would hear that Quakers were like breaking into church meetings and being disrupt and saying that the preacher was wrong, and I was like, yeah, you go. But actually now I'm like, yeah, but that was a really that's if I were sitting in that church service, I'd be so annoyed at these people, and I wouldn't want anything to do with them. And it kind of reminds me, Quakers changed very quickly, so that when the Methodists were coming around and doing pretty much the same thing, then all the Quakers were like, get out of our meeting, this isn't how you do worship. And it's just funny that, like, I think I can't remember where it was now, but someone said a quote that was like, with the Methodists, that Quakers didn't realize they couldn't recognize their younger selves. And
yeah, it's how quickly they've forgotten.
Yeah. And so, yes, I am proud of it, and I'm glad that and I'm very happy to have it. But I think what the book has just shown me is the darker side of that, precisely what it promises. It does everything. You absolutely deliver, Erica, in a fantastic book.
Thank you so much. Like, that's so generous and kind. Thank you.
I would like to ask if will there be a sequel? Is there more coming? Where is your research taking you now?
I'm sort of like, yeah, I'm thinking about what's next. I'm thinking about what's next. I mean, by trade, I am a 17th century Quaker historian. So I think no matter what comes next, like, there's always going to be an element of that radical Quakerism there. I've devoted a lot of my life to it, and to be honest, like, I love it, and I want to, I always hope that I'm quite evangelical about I'm a little 17th century Quakery about my love for this subject and this period of history. I think the 17th century, it's sort of I think it gets passed along. It gets, I think it, for some reason, the 17th century is ignored. And I think that's because the 16th century is, particularly in England, we have, we have Tudor history, which is just so extraordinary, such an extraordinary, rich period of history. And then when we look at American history, like, American history starts in the 18th century, really.
Yeah.
And so the 17th century, there doesn't seem to be, like, there's not a whole lot of attention sort of paid to this period of history. And so I feel very privileged that this is a part of it's a part of the Quaker story that I can share with the wider world. Like, it's very important to me. Accessibility is very important to me. It's very important. It was very important that I wrote a book, firstly, that was not expensive, not prohibitively expensive. Like, it was like, that was sort of like, that was the first thing that any book that I was going to put out there, like, I didn't want it to be sort of just so incredibly expensive, which a lot of academic work is.
As we were saying right at the beginning, like, this is getting other people interested, and because it's funny, because you say that, oh yeah, people, like, the 17th century is kind of forgotten about for a lot of people, whereas actually for Quakers, this is like our jam. This is all we think about, arguably too much. But yeah, in the British mindset, Tudors, and then
Industrial Revolution, I think.
Industrial Revolution, we'll go there. Whereas American history is, 1700s, 18th century, and then you kind of have, and so I find that very interesting. And so I can imagine for lots of historians and people interested in interested in history generally, that this book is probably eye-opening in a way, because although people talk about the civil wars all relatively often, that's covered relatively often, but this isn't. And I think you've really hit on something which hopefully will lead to a lot more interest in Quakerism.
Oops, I certainly hope so. And it's been, as I said at the start, like it's been a very cool ride so far. And
Mm,
I love sort of being able to showcase this history, kind of, to the world. I think that there's so much juicy stuff, juicy Quaker history in the 17th century that I think gets overlooked. And I think that, when people think about religion, naturally they think that, oh, a book like this is going to be bogged down in theology. And so that was
yeah.
something that I was very mindful of definitely not doing, mainly
Yes.
because there are scholars who do it infinitely better than I ever could. And so I am, I am a social historian. I am interested in the lives of everyday people.
Mm,
I'm interested in that human experience. And in the early Quaker story, that human experience is everything. Like if
yeah.
people did not hear this message and they weren't compelled to do something about it, there would be no early Quakerism. Like it's obviously like, the leaders are, making headlines, but it's the people on the ground who are establishing communities, like strong communities. That is why Quakerism survives.
Yeah, that can last persecution, that can last, uh, moving into a century where, numbers do die down, but yet these meetings still go, still carry on. I think it's fascinating. We've and to think, Eric, we've been talking for like 2.5 hours. I don't think we've gone into the depths of the book. There's still so much more that people can find out. So they must buy
Yes.
it from
Yes.
all reputable and probably some unreputable booksellers
Yeah,
as
the
well, I'm
dodgy
sure.
ones as well.
Yeah, they'll have it on. And obviously, Erica, is there, if people wanted to come and find you, is where can they go to find more Erica Canela content?
I'm all over social media. Like generally, if you, like, I feel like I'm pretty easy to find. If you just search for my name, you will tend to, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Threads.
Erica, it's been a whirlwind. It's been so fun looking at this darker side of history. Thank you for spending the time to talk about it. It's been should I tell you what, it's been actually just so fun. Like I've laughed so much more than I think I have in any conversation that I've had. So thank you for making it so enjoyable and for producing such a fantastic book.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being so engaged and the lovely, kind things you have said. And you know what? I'm glad that you enjoyed the book. Like ultimately, at the end of the day, like
Sure.
that's all I want is for people to enjoy the book, and it means a lot to me that you have. So yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and have a chat, a very long chat.
I've loved every minute of it, and I know that the viewers will have as well. I thank these viewers for watching this episode, and I'll see you in the next episode. See you later.
Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up and the subscribe button to get more videos about Quakerism in the UK today. It really does help, and thanks once again.